Hello, Matthew. Great. I'll do a quick introduction, and then we can get right into the conversation. Today, my name's Adam Parkin. I'm Blacklane's head of global communications, and welcome to everyone joining our Blacklane Instagram Live conversation. So today we're talking about the future of business travel, and we have with us Matthew Parsons. He is the corporate travel editor at Skift, which is the largest industry intelligence platform in travel. Skift they're the ones who decipher and define global trends. I would just say they're like the must-read homepage of travel news. So if you're not reading Skift, you absolutely should be. Matthew's travel journalism experience includes Business Travel News Europe, Buying Business Travel, TTG. He was the Business Travel Editor of the Year in 2018. So we could not have a better guest. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
Of course. So we will just get right into it. And before we start, I'll just say for everyone joining, if you have questions, if you have comments, feedback, just leave them in add some comments, and we'll both be paying attention to them. And I will work in as many questions and topics as we can as we have our conversation. You can ask global trends, regional trends. You can go into the corporate side, the business traveler side, wherever your interest is. By all means, let us know. Ground transportation, airlines, hotels, you name it, and we'd be happy to cover it. So first, Matthew, how do we go? What's it going to take to go for companies to be sending travelers on the road again? And the big question everyone's asking is when. And I know that may vary regionally, but what will it take for companies to get people back out on the road?
It's a good question. Everyone's asking this right now. Before we start this conversation, as a caveat, really, just talk about, what's happening, with this crisis. But obviously this is a huge lives, people's lives. So in some way, it feels almost different to discuss things happening now. But obviously, just want to say, bearing all this in mind, and we're very much, as part of the, as a journalist role, is to look forward. So it's not kind of belittling anything that's happening in the immediate impact. But in terms of, what's happening next, it's corporate travel, it's due diligence, so it's going to be about standards. And in the last, I'd probably say 2 weeks, there's been a lot of activity from the big organisations. So we've got IATA, who's getting standards in place. WTT, the World Travel and Tourism Council, they're saying let's get standards in place. United Nations are probably going to get involved. So it's all about those definitions where you can tick a box and say, right, we're good to go. Obviously, the vaccine is the ultimate.
Right.
But for now, it's standards. And recently, I've been hearing talk of these kind of corona corridors, travel corridors. You have one destination, go into another, say it's, there's a nice beach and a resort, so it's going to facilitate people coming into that airport, flowing through these corridors to get to that resort safely. So that's very much a leisure phenomenon at the moment. And I think that will spread over to corporate travel. So it's those standards and those definitions which would be big.
Okay. I'm seeing a comment, Matthew, that your voice is cutting in and out. I'm hearing a little bit too. I don't know if maybe sitting a bit closer may help. I don't know. Yes, I think that's a little bit better. So you mentioned standardizations. What are some examples that we could see? Like what kind of, are we talking policies and procedures, and are we talking also things that will need to be included in corporate RFPs now, where travel managers will say to the suppliers, either you need to come up with a standard or you need to be meeting these standards? Like what will these standards entail?
I think to start off with, it's the health authorities in different countries which are going to have the most say in this. When it comes to agreeing on a specific type of antibody test, say, look, you've got a kind of immunity passport, you've got a certificate that says you can go from this country to another country. And I covered this a couple of weeks ago, talking to couple of companies, Zamna, which is working on our one ID scheme. Another company working on a Corona Pass.
Mm-hmm.
But meeting up those health authorities and governments, and the governments can talk to each other, and then you can go from one airport to another airport. Obviously, we're talking air travel is the main step. So as long as those governments talk to each other, then things can get going. So and then that will get factored into hopefully the corporate booking tool. So hopefully you'll see, players like Agencia factoring in perhaps some kind of approval process where they say yes, blood tests complete, immunity passport is there, they can go through the air.
Okay. All right. I didn't catch that last sentence, and it looks like one of our guests said that we're still having a bit of difficulty with the audio. I don't know. Hopefully it'll resolve itself.
Microphone, but yeah.
Okay. A little bit. I was going to say, I don't know if headphones would work as well. Maybe that would help. And then we would be matching, so then I don't feel quite as dorky having mine in.
Okay. Is that any better? Yeah.
Oh, that is way better. Yes.
Okay.
I've
normally always use these, but I thought this time would be a bit more easier with that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. And again, now we're matching, although you're cooler since you have one hanging out. But so I'm going to recommend to everybody, by the way, that Skift had a great article this week saying that the coming future of travel in 100 questions. Clever headline, because actually I think it was 114 or something along those lines. A lot of different questions. And it's really just, it sparked a lot of discussion and thought, but I'll kind of turn things back on you and ask one or two of those. One of them that was in the article that I thought would be really good to touch on is the era of giant conventions with acres and acres of land over forever. I mean, here in Berlin, of course, and I'm sure many of our viewers are familiar with ITB Berlin, which, that's the size of a small city. And you can think of Mobile World Congress as other ones, or even in this industry, GBTA, which I don't know that it takes acres, but it's one of the biggest events in business travel, 7,000 people every year. So what are we looking at in terms of this era of giant conventions?
Good question. I think...
you asked it, so, it is a great question.
I think in the short to medium term, yes. There's going to be a big pause because of this. We're going to start off with social distancing, so it's going to be very, small events, small numbers. But I think, that desire to have, bigger and better. That's what corporations do. There's, been lots of conferences. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think there's going to be a pause, and I think in the long term it'll slowly, creep back up. But obviously, the short and medium term, I'd say the next 2-3 years, it's going to be a big pause. And I think Salesforce was one of the more recent companies to postpone its big convention for next year. So they're not gone forever. I wouldn't say that at all. I think there's just that innate desire to kind of network and to have bigger and better. World Travel Market, for example, you have airline, you have almost, the interiors of planes being built inside these big conventions. So there's that desire to always, create the, big experiences. And I think that will creep back eventually, but a long time away.
Okay. Do you see if some countries allow gatherings of 100, do you see event organizers then saying, we can have 100 people, let's have a 100-person meeting, whether it's, a company having its own internal sales meeting, or local events happening, or do you think that that's going to be is that type of event even on the horizon?
I think there's so much pent up demand. I think people will, we're into kind of week 6, week 7 of the lockdown. I don't know about you personally, but I'm kind of really feeling it at the moment. I think this week's been really tough for me personally, just wanting to get out and do more things. So I think as soon as, the corporations allowed staff to attend these events, then absolutely. I think, there's talk of October for kind of some of the smaller events taking place. So
Okay.
absolutely. I think people would be chomping at the bit to get out there.
Yeah. And do you think, how much do people even want to travel right now? I mean, do you think people are just, wanting to get back out there, whether it's to an event or traveling for work? And I think of like, your consultants of the world, are they ready to get back out? Or even on the traveler side, are people wanting to be cautious?
I think there's more pent up demand than you'd realize. I mean, just talking to, contacts and friends, and colleagues, you're noticing a lot of photos on social media, a lot of kind of panging for those good old days where you could just go off and, catch a flight somewhere.
Right.
I think business travel, there's that mix with, with leisure, and it's, for some people, it's a way of life. The road warriors, it's what they do. So I think there's a lot of demand, and it's just going to go up and up. But yeah, it's just a waiting game at the moment. But I'd say people are ready to move. I mean, how do you feel personally? Do you kind of feel yourself that you'd like to get out there again? If the flights were back up, or?
Yeah, it's so I miss what I miss is the things that are familiar, which are not accessible now. So the last trip I took was to the LCT show in Las Vegas, and I mean, who doesn't like going to Las Vegas in February? First of all, but especially traveling from Berlin. So the weather, the climate, all those things, but just being with other people in the industry. But you can't, you can't have the proximity and the handshakes and the interactions, the meaningful interactions you would like to have. So, I say, no, I don't want to travel right now, but it's only because, the travel experience I would want when I got there, the meetings couldn't even be what I would want them to be.
Yeah. But it's there, and I think the longer the the lockdown continues, you're going to see a lot of people. I think there'll be a huge potential surge in demand, and it all comes back to communication from a business travel perspective. What we're seeing is that there's a lot of demand from the suppliers. They want to be in regular contact with the corporates and the travel managers to know when certain companies are going to start traveling again, so they can then start to get the staff back on board, come out of furlough. So there's people need to be really communicating about this for it to take off effectively. So, but yeah, the demand is there. It's just whether the supplier side can meet that demand and tick all the right criteria for the corporates.
Yeah, and this impacts Skift directly. I mean, you have the Skift Global Forum and Skift Forum Europe. I hope I got the names precisely right. Yeah. But I mean, so you have a couple of events every year as well. At least those are the bigger ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're big parts of the Skift product offering, and I mean, we're going to be going to virtual for some of those events. Some are going to be postponed, so it's just kind of working out the best times. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting innovations around the technology, which I think we're going to start seeing in the next few months. I know the ITM, so the Institute of Travel Managers in the UK, pretty big organisation. They 500-600 people, so they're going to be moving to virtual for their event in May. And I'll talk to Scott Davis, who runs that, and he's got some some good plans around that. So yeah.
Good. Well, I'll just have a quick plug. Some people may have joined us mid-conversation. So if you're tuning in, by all means, send us your questions, comments, where you are watching us from, and what we can discuss, and topics that are of interest to you. So we're, of course, on the chauffeur ground transportation side is very interesting for us specifically. Kind of a multi-part question for you. How do you think companies will change their ground transportation policies? And specifically, will some companies replace short-haul flights and train rides with car trips, whether they be chauffeured or whether they're encouraging their employees to rent rent vehicles, or if it's from a home office, take their own personal vehicles? How do you see people's confidence in ride hailing versus taxis and versus chauffeurs? So I think I asked you three questions in one there, but I just bumped them all out.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously the planes, it's an interesting situation. I mean, they're talking about removing the middle rows from aircraft. I think all the airlines now are saying, the face masks are going to be compulsory for crew and passengers going forwards. Straight away, that kind of, that imagery makes you think, is this the safest way to travel? So I think the short-term impacts will be, huge demands for ground transport. So whether it's, chauffeurs, car hire, even things like Uber, I think, the kind of, maybe not the car sharing, but those initial phases, I think, they will replace a lot of the rail travel, short haul flights, potentially. Yeah, I think it's just, with these measures that are coming into place now and the kind of, like I said before, about the talk about the standards, and that's going to take a long time. I mean, these are big organizations talking about creating a pathway back to it. So in the short term, absolutely, I think the ground transportation sector will be looked at quite closely by travel managers.
Yeah. I'll pull back a little bit and ask another question from the Skift article, which
you've been studying that quite well, I see.
I just picked two questions, so this is the last one from there, but very provocative questions. So the other one that caught my attention was, are we, or I guess it would be, were we at peak business travel, and will the numbers come back? And what are your thoughts on just volumes of business travel?
Yeah, I mean, the volumes were huge. I mean, prior to this, going back to kind of November, just the amount of business travel was booming. You have to look at all the overseas conferences taking place from suppliers and trade organisations. So it was definitely peak, and I kind of looked at this arguments about a month ago when I just after joining Skift, and one consultant was saying, it's a lot of business travel, but there's a lot of indulgences. There's a lot of perks. There's a lot of unnecessary, non-essential business travel taking place because of the kind of the hotels and the kind of lifestyle that people associate with it. So I think we had that peak, and it's going to take a long time to get back to those levels. I mean, we haven't talked about virtual meetings yet, but there's that immediate impact from that. There's going to be the financial impacts as companies try and recover from this. So spending on travel and marketing is normally the first to go. So the peak is going to be, coming back to those levels will take a long time. I mean, some of the companies are talking about 3-4 years, the airlines, before things get back to normal. So you could say the same for business travel. Okay. So yeah, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and even just going back to the other part about conferences, if you're not having any large scale conferences, even if everything else hit where it was, if you don't have everybody going to and from Mobile World Congress and ITB and Consumer Electronics Show and all of these, I mean, that alone is a huge chunk of business travel that just will not be replaced for the time being. Yeah,
I mean, the meeting side is, it's kind of, it's a long pathway back for sure.
Right. One of our participants, Michael, he said, what do you think about putting plastic walls between drivers and guests on chauffeurs and ride hailing? So, these kind of the plexiglass separator.
Yeah, and airlines have been looking at that as well, haven't they, on their aircraft? I think.
I saw that. Yes.
I think these measures, whether or not they're 100% effective, they will be really important just to kind of give people confidence and reassure travellers. And I think from the business travel side of things, it's all about reassurances and confidence, to make people less nervous about traveling. So, we're going to see a lot of that in the future. Whether or not they're effective, it's hard to say, but they're pretty important gestures, I think. And I'd rather go with one company that offered that compared to another which didn't. So,
no, that is insightful. I think, I've seen it pop up here and there among individuals, or maybe one Uber ride-hailing driver or something like that. But I haven't seen it en masse anywhere yet. But something certainly to keep an eye out for. Um, we had a question from Marliese. She had asked this before in one of our comments. She said, how will businesses be able to justify travel going forward, given the rise of platforms like Zoom, et cetera, that are really taking off? I mean, how many trips just won't happen because of a bottom line? Somebody can say, I just do it on Zoom. It works great. We've been using it for months, so no need to make the trip at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I think, travel managers are going to be, fighting a lot more in the future to kind of justify what they do in terms of, the value of travel to the business. I mean, there's a kind of argument now where the lines are blurring between the kind of finance departments and the travel departments. I mean, in part, this is due to, in one way, expense platforms like Concur, which are kind of, start off with expenses and then plug in travel. So suddenly the CFOs are in charge of a lot of travel decisions. And when we come out the other side of this crisis, they're going to be looking at the balance sheet and thinking, well, we didn't do too bad. We saved all this money on travel. Do we really need to do it again? So the larger companies with that kind of heavy involvement from the financial departments will be looking at this very closely. And maybe it's an opportunity for travel managers to do more around the kind of virtual working, remote working, virtual meetings in the future. But it's going to be, they'll have to do a lot of work to kind of really justify. I mean, a lot of people know the value of travel. If it's embedded into the culture of an organization, it can be a very successful way of growing the business. But I think on the other side of this, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of justify the travel budget. Definitely.
Yep. And how will what will make certain suppliers stand out as in terms of business travel? Like when travel managers are looking, whether it's ground transportation, comparing us versus other companies, hotels, if somebody's comparing Hilton versus Marriott versus Hyatt, what are the things that they will be looking for to differentiate and say, okay, I trust this brand or this supplier more than this one? Any insights on what that will look like?
I mean, you could say price is going to be an important factor. For smaller companies with less stringent duty of care obligations, the SMEs, they might say, look, we've got some great deals with this hotel. They want our business. Let's use them. For the larger corporations, it's going to come back to those standards. I mean, if Hilton's signed up to a kind of certificate scheme or something like that, then the travel managers need to look after the employees, the duty of care obligations. So it's going to be signing up to those standards. I know Hilton are kind of, there's different schemes with various companies to say, look, we clean the rooms in a certain way, therefore they are, they're completely reliable. So it's back to standards for the bigger companies, I think.
And Michael asked, who in travel will benefit from the impact of Corona? I mean, benefits maybe isn't don't want to look at it necessarily like that, but who will advance or come out ahead when this is all said and done? Because obviously many companies are struggling and are having to rethink everything.
I mean, it's the tech companies, isn't it? I mean, obviously, the first conclusion is the virtual meeting platform. So the likes of Zoom, doing really well from this. And I think technology companies that are kind of, innovating or experimenting around distribution. I mean, there's one kind of side effect from this pandemic is the sheer amount of downtime that tech teams have got, suppliers have got. So there's not much happening now travel wise. So they've got, months and months to look at these integrations. So I think some of the tech companies will definitely benefit from this. It's a new playing field when this happens. So I'd say those kind of companies, the startups, will do pretty well out of this if they can find the right business model.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see here. I think we've talked about standards a bunch. These standards, I'm presuming there'll be a mix of processes and products, like, you have to use X type of sanitizer, or you have to use some kind of UV lights for a certain number of minutes, or you have to, check that you've touched all of these specific services. I mean, is that what we're really looking like? Or will they get that granular? Is it, every hotel, you have to make sure you wipe down the door handles, and you have to, anywhere that a finger could touch, or you have to look at a black light to see if there are fingerprints? What level are we talking about for the standards?
Again, I think to really kickstart that movement again, it's going to come from, potentially IATA. We're talking about airlines. That's the big businesses. It's all about flying. So at the granular level, I saw something on social media, and it was a hotel basically showing photos of how it cleans not just the buttons in the lift, but actually around the buttons. So it was kind of this, this very precise cleaning mechanism, and that's great, and that will reassure its customers. But that has to filter up into a larger organisation like IATA or the WTTC. Mm-hmm. So all these efforts they're emerging. You've got the unusual partnerships between medical companies and the hospitality sector, which you just wouldn't have imagined. But now they're coming together, and that will again give peace of mind. So I think we're a long way off. These are we're talking millions and millions of travellers waiting to get going again. So it's going to have to be a long process, unfortunately, is my gut feeling.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about the buttons on the elevator, it just made me think that something like the COVID-19 could really increase the adoption of, say, hotel apps where your phone is the key card. So you don't have to touch a key card that somebody behind a front desk who touched key cards that 200 other guests may have touched that day, or if even for rental cars where there's an app where you have keyless entry, that there's these things where you may want to just reduce as many touch points as possible. But then on the other hand, I think about when I was in Las Vegas, the hotel I went to, I could wait in line and check in at the front desk, or I could go to a monitor and touch a screen. And I didn't even think about how many people may have touched that screen before me. So it'll be interesting to see which automation technologies will increase and which may decrease because of just physical contact with various surfaces.
Yeah. I think, those hotels which, there's been lots of talk about these robots, the robot concierge and the robots bringing you, room service. Those hotels will really, really benefit from this. It's before it was seen as a marketing, marketing tactic, but now these sort of things will be, they'll be accelerated, and this is what the crisis will do. It will create these new ways of checking in, like you say, with the mobile keys and that kind of thing. So all these things will help drive confidence, I think.
Even thinking about going to the airport, I use electronic boarding passes, or I'll print it up on my home printer. But then if I check a bag, only with my family. As a seasoned business traveler, I would never check a bag. But when I travel with my family, but they give you the physical tags. If I have the airline's app, I would much rather just get it there now instead of having another piece of paper that somebody else has touched.
Yeah, the world is going to be completely different. I saw images of a hotel in Amsterdam, and it was showcasing how the conferences will take place, and it was just a huge room with obviously these chairs spaced 3 meters away from each other, and it was just, you wouldn't recognize it. It's just a completely different world that's around the corner.
Right. We did get a question here from Denmark, Special Service Denmark, saying, will UMAT prefer ground transportation instead of flying because of the increased risk of coronavirus or other similar viruses? We talked about this a little bit for everyone else, but this one I think would be you personally. What are your what do you think you would prefer? Yeah,
I think right now, yes, I would. again, until there's that vaccine or that kind of, the numbers just really, significantly drop down. For me, I would feel safer. I mean, you go to a supermarket and you see the kind of measures being taken. Mm-hmm. To think of that kind of plane environment. I think for me, yeah, personally, I would, yeah.
Okay. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. In this, these things change every day, don't they? But my kind of feeling now is, it's almost just coming down from the peak of the pandemic. So yeah.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned pricing as a way that some companies would compete, certainly for RFPs. But what do you see for pricing? I mean, on the one hand, the basic economics would tell me supply and demand. If you take the middle seat out of an airplane, then you have really decreased the supply. On the other hand, we don't know what the demand is going to be. And then not to mention the middle seats, but we just have hundreds or thousands of aircrafts that are not in the air, and who knows when they will get in the air. And different airlines are saying, well, we're just going to retire these older planes now. So, what do you think will happen for, for this, for pricing? And hotels, of course, it's kind of the opposite problem. The rooms are there. If the hotels are open, I mean, the rooms are there. And so the supply doesn't change as much. But then they may be paying more for cleaning and various, sanitization. So what can we expect on prices?
It's again, it's the big question now. I mean, it's probably too soon to tell. I mean, the airlines are, they're grounded. We're waiting for them to slowly get going again. I think there will be, certain routes, the busy routes, there might be a price wars coming into place. So you're going to get some really good deals at the start, because they just want people to get used to flying again, build that confidence up. Mm-hmm. Again, with the hotels, good deals, cheap prices, corporate and leisure, because they want to get people back into them. Funnily enough, a lot of the travel managers I've talked to, the travel buyers have been saying, they'd be happy to pay the higher prices initially to help not fund those airlines, but those routes that might be pretty particular to a certain, maybe a tech company which flies from one remote city to another one. They're ready to invest in those kind of higher airfares, because they need those routes, and it's those secondary routes which are going to suffer in the initial recovery, because they're expensive to run. So yeah, it's a good question, but I think low fares, low rates at the start, and then they will come back up.
All right. Well, we'll go away from some of the doom and gloom and be a bit more optimistic here. Is there a change that, you said things are going to look completely different, and I think all of us can imagine these are going to be steps. I mean, I would figure when airports do reopen, what they look like right away will be different 3 months later and 6 months later as more technologies and improvements come in. But what changes are you looking forward to? Is there a way that some of the processes can be redesigned to increase both safety and efficiency? Is that possible? Is there a change that you're thinking, this will be great, I have finally wanted this, and now they're saying, they being an airport, airline, whomever, they're going to deliver it?
Yeah, well, you could say, there's going to be a quieter, calmer experience, perhaps, when things pick up. I guess one positive aspect for me will be, globally, there'd just be such a greater appreciation of travel. It's a privilege to travel. I've always thought, I feel that, travel is a force for good. And having this lockdown at the moment is kind of really affecting a lot of people around the world. So I think when people do get back onto planes, whether it's leisure or business, you're going to really appreciate and savor that experience a lot more. So that's a kind of, I think on a humanity level. Another positive, if you could say that from all this, is just again, I mentioned it before, just the innovation. I mean, there's been a lot of time, a lot of creative people who have just been, they've had time to look at what's next. So, developing new tools. I think there's one area I've covered, which is the kind of, the basic business model of corporate travel agencies. They charge on a transaction fee, whereas they do a lot of other things in the background, whether it's duty of care and data reporting, mobile booking solutions, that kind of thing. So I think they're going to be thinking hard about their future revenue models. So we're going to see a lot of innovation, a lot of change, and it's going to be a really interesting time. As a journalist, it's kind of, there's this whole new world. I've said that so many times in this interview, but there's a whole new world around the corner, and it's going to look so different. And that's kind of pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to wrap things up. I mean, if you have a final thought or question, by all means. But I think I'll just give another personal plug for Skift. I think Skift is the company to tell those stories about what's going to change in travel. So, like I said at the beginning, I think people who most of our viewers are probably familiar with Skift, but if not, by all means, it should be they should read it every day. Truly, it's the first newsletter that I read every day. And so that's not going to change. So I appreciate what you and your colleagues at Skift are doing. And I'm looking forward to answers to those 114 questions too. So
coming soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, just that could be, every year you do the mega trends. I mean, you could pull your mega trends just trying to answer those questions.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. Yeah, definitely. So
yes.
Yeah.
So Matthew, thank you very much for your time. And,
thank you.
Yes, whenever I can travel to London or you can travel to Berlin, it'd be great to see you in person.
Yeah,
until then, stay safe. We really appreciate your time. And have a good day.
Cool. Okay. Cheers.
Thanks.
You
Cheers.
too.